In this tutorial, we're going to cover Adobe Illustrator Classroom and Book Chapter 3, all about using shapes to create artwork for a postcard. So you'll see here we've got our final postcard that we'll be creating. We will be building the boat with shapes. We'll be using the mountains, the stars, the X. You do not need to draw the island part, so don't worry about that part. So let's go ahead and get started with a File and New. We want to go ahead and do it for print. We want to make sure we change it to inches. We want the width to be 6 inches and the height to be 4.25. We want to make sure it's landscape, and we have 2 artboards. And from there, let's go ahead and say create. So now you can see I've got my 2 artboards side by side, but I want to add an imaginary border called a bleed, which helps me make sure that I make my artwork big enough so when this is cut down to size, it will have color from one edge to the other. So let's go ahead and do a File, Save As. Let's go to our lessons. Make sure you're in your Lesson 3 folder. Change this to postcard.ai. And say, when you get this options, just say yes. You're good to go. Alright, so now let's add that bleed in. Let's go to our document setups. In the second line down, you'll notice you've got something called bleed. Because the chain is on, when you change one, it will change them all at the same time. So let's add a bleed all the way around at 1.25 and say OK. So now you'll see you've got this imaginary red line, which tells us how much over the edges we should go in order to make sure our artwork turns out OK. So the next thing we're going to do is start playing with some basic shapes. Let's go ahead and do a View and a Fit Artboard and Window, so we're just concentrating on one side. When we're creating shapes, we're actually creating paths and anchor points that either connect or they don't. Paths can be closed, they can be open, they can have endpoints, they can have fills and colors applied to them. There's a lot of different things you can do with a path. So let's start with making some rectangles in order to make this X marks the spot for our document. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit. So you can kind of see you've got an X, but it doesn't necessarily it's not like totally flat X. So we're going to make some curved lines and things, curved corners. We're going to go here to our Tools panel, and I'm going to grab my Rectangle tool. So I'm going to go ahead and make a rectangle by dragging down. I'm going to drag down 0.2 inches, and I want it to be about 0.5 inches wide. So you'll notice you've got those tool tips right there on the side that kind of tell you the width and height. And if it's not perfect, that's okay. We can go ahead and fix it. By default, you're always going to get a white shape with a black border, and then you can always change it later. So it's not perfect. Let's go ahead and go over here to our width and height and our properties panel. Go ahead and make that 0.5 and make it 2 inches, and that will adjust it to the perfect measurements that we're looking for this time. So you'll notice that if you were in a Photoshop, you would have to use the selection tool in order to move things around. With Illustrator, we can actually move without having to switch tools by grabbing this center point, which is kind of brilliant. So let's go ahead and start making this look like an X. But this is kind of fat and kind of weird right now, so I want it to be a little bit skinnier. I'm going to go over my middle section here. I'm going to hit Alt and bring it in, and notice how it's bringing in both sides at one time. I want to bring it in to be about 0.3. So I'm going to change it over here, 0.3. So I've got that put together. I'm going to do a Control S for save, just so we get in the habit of doing that. So now I need to tilt my rectangle over in order to start making it into an X. I'm going to go over my corner. I'm going to get a curved arrow. With my curved arrow, I'm going to hit Shift, and this will let me move in degree increments rather than having to freeform trying to find the best position to create this X. So I'm going to release the mouse and then the Shift key and get them all at the same time. So now let's do a few things to this cute little rectangle we have. I'm going to zoom in so you can see a little bit better. With my selection tool, I'm going to click on what's called the corner widget, which looks kind of like a bullseye, and I can pull in and out, and it's going to help me determine how round those corners are going to be. And we're going to do all of them at once, which is really nice. So what else can we do with it? Let's go ahead and play with a few other things. Let's go into our transform, go to more options, and let's make sure that our do all at the same time is clicked so that we actually get the little chain. And I want it to be 0.125, so they're all that degree of round. So now I want to make one of these square. I can do that by going to grab my direct selection tool. I'm going to double click on this top one. I'm going to change that radius to a 0 and hit OK. So now I have that one, what was round is now square, which makes us happy. Alright, so what else can we do? We can tell, there's another way to do that. We can, and that pops up the corners dialog box. Another way to do it is to grab, double click, you can push cancel, double click that guy and drag it out, and you can make it square as well. So let's see what else we can do. Let's switch back to our selection tool. Let's go ahead and make our fill red. And let's go here to our stroke and change it to, we don't want any stroke at all. Remember, the stroke is the outline. Let's do an edit and a copy and edit a paste in front. So you're not going to see it because we just laid it exactly on top. So let's go ahead, go out here, grab our rotating arrow, hit our shift key, drag over until we get 45 degrees, release the mouse, release shift, and now we've got the second part of our X. Let's go ahead and make that one just a little bit different color. Go to our fill and hit this second color of red. Let's go to select all on active artboard. So it's going to select anything that we've got on there and tell it to group. So now we have made one single image instead of two separate pieces that we have to drag around. So we like that. Let's go ahead and do a Control-Shift-A to deselect and a Control-S to save what we've got so far. The next thing we're going to start doing is making the boat. So we've got this little boat over here. It's got a mast, it's got a sail, it's got the kind of the bottom part of the boat. So we're going to play with that next. I'm going to go ahead and go over, grab another part of my artboard. I'm going to do this with let's play with the rounded rectangle. So let's go ahead, grab the rounded rectangle, click and drag. We're going to go about 2 inches wide and 1.5 inches long, but don't let go of the mouse key. I want you to try something. I want you to try hitting the down arrow and the up arrow and see how that changes the amount of the radius of the curve, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and see what else we've got. If we go over here to our properties panel, we're going to make sure our width is 0.1 so that we're making it a little bit skinnier because that's way too fat for the mast, and making it 1 inch long, and hit enter. So now we're getting that mast. So let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. Control plus or use your zoom key, either one. Let's go ahead and grab our selection tool and let's drag the corner widgets. Let's go up a little bit till we've got a value of 0.2. So now they all change at the same time because we had our corner widget, we're working on everything. Let's double click on one of them and open what's called the transform panel. Within here we want to change the individual corners themselves. So another way to do that, make sure you turn your lock off because we want them to do it independently. We want the bottom left to be 0 and square. We want the bottom right to be 0 and square. Go ahead and X out of that to close that. So now if I click to the side, you'll see I've got a nice rounded top and a flat bottom. Let's go ahead, reselect it by clicking on it, and our fill, let's go ahead and make it a brown. Let's go with dark brown. And that will be, that's really dark. Let's go to the next one over. And that is our mast of our boat. I'm going to do a Control S to save, Control Shift A in order to deselect. So the next thing we want to play with is building the actual base of the boat itself by playing with some ellipse. So I'm going to grab my artboard. I'm going to do View, Fit Bar, Artboard, and Window. So there's where I've got so far. So we want to go over to our Rectangle tool and grab our Ellipse tool. Now ellipse is a circle. It's an egg. It's what you draw circles with. Alright, so what we're going to do is click and drag an ellipse out till it's about 1.5 inches wide and about 0.5 inches tall. So let's go ahead and adjust that. Once again, if I don't like it, I can always go back over here, change it to 1.5 and my height to 0.5. So now I've got my perfect ellipse, which is going to turn into part of the base of my boat. But right now it doesn't look like it's going to do that. It will. We just have to play with it a little bit. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see what's going on. Let's go ahead and make a copy of this ellipse so that we have an extra for the next effect. Let's grab our selection tool. We can go up to Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste, and let's drag that guy out of the way. Let's go ahead and go back to our original, and we're going to basically cut this ellipse in half. There's an easy way to do this with Illustrator. We're going to go over here to the side of the ellipse. You've got another widget, another dartboard, and we're going to take and hold, and we're going to drag that pie all the way across to about 180. And we can always adjust it a little bit when we get a little bit farther. How do we do that? We go under Transform, we hit our More Options, and right here we see our pie angle. Go ahead and change that to 180 and enter. So now it's perfectly flat. Alright, so now we've got the bottom of the boat. Let's go ahead and move it over, select the bottom of our boat, and put it on the bottom of our mast. So you notice you get those magenta guides. Move that down. So you can kind of see where to and how to line up that base to the bottom of the mast. So let's go ahead and do a file save, do a Control-Shift-A to deselect. So now we need to add this part of the kind of the floor of the or the deck of the boat. So we're going to play with our other ellipse in order to do that. We're going to go ahead, select that other ellipse that we had, and we're going to go ahead and move it up over. I'm going to do my View, Fit Artboard and Window. I'm going to move it up over top of the other one I just made, which seems ridiculous, but it actually is going to work. Alright, let's change the color a little bit so we can kind of see what's going on. I'm going to make it kind of a lighter brown so I can see what's the difference over here in my properties. Click outside of it. Alright, then I'm going to take this top middle point and I'm going to drag it with my Alt key down to about 0.1. Or, yeah, 0.1 inch. So we're making it pretty skinny. 0.3, right? 0.13. Nah, too skinny. Alright, we'll have to go through and adjust that. I can change that right here with a 0.1. So now we're actually starting to make it look like the deck of the boat, which is pretty cool. What do we want to do next? Next we want to go ahead and play with the stroke on this dude. So let's go ahead and go to Stroke and open our stroke panel. We want the stroke weight to be 2. And it's going to say, where do you want to align the stroke? Do you want it to be in the center, on the inside, on the outside? We want to go ahead and align it to inside, which is the middle button. And see how it kind of makes that shadow on the inside now. We also want to make sure that we change the color of it. So let's go ahead to our stroke color and make it kind of that lighter brown. So now you've got kind of that lighter brown color going on around the outside of your boat. So you could have made this a different color. I like it. I think it's fine for now. Totally up to you as to what you're going to do as far as the deck goes. Let's go ahead and click out of that. Do Control S to save. Let's click on the brown rectangle and move it so it's actually sitting in the middle of our boat and it doesn't look like it's behind. So let's go to Arrange over here on our properties. And we want Bring to Front. So now you see you've got your mast in front of basically the other side of the boat in order to create that depth. And let's go ahead and hit Control S to save. And we are deselected. So one of the next things that we need to do is we will be working on creating a few different items. We're going to work on basically what will end up being part of the diamonds here in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead with my selection tool and group the bits of that boat so I can get them out of the way for now. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and play with some circles. So yes, I told you it's not a circle, it's an ellipse. Keep that ellipse tool. You can draw a perfect circle by holding the Shift key. So click and hold Shift and you can get a circle. We want one that's about an inch or so. Make sure you release the mouse button, then the Shift key. Otherwise it'll turn into an egg, which is probably what you don't want. Alright, with it selected, let's go ahead and grab that bounding point right here. And we're going to go ahead and make a little bit smaller. So let's grab that middle bounding point and drag it toward the center and make it smaller. Now notice it's only doing one little bit at a time, which is what I don't want to do. If I hold Shift and drag, it'll bring it in proportionally, which is what I do want. And we want to go ahead and bring it down to 0.3 inches. So we want a much smaller circle than we had before. So I can click and drag, still holding Shift. Alright, I let go of my mouse, I let go of my Shift key. And let's go ahead and fill this with a light gray. Let's go to Fill. And if you notice, if you hover over, you get the different CIAB breakouts. We want the one that ends with 10, so it's the second one over. Alright, I'm going to go ahead, grab that guy, move him out of the way. We're going to need him for later. So move him out of the way for later, or I could have grabbed the center. Let's do a Control S to get that out of the way. Well, the next things we're going to play with is creating polygons, which is a triangle, a rectagon, rectagon, what am I doing? Octagon. There's a lot of different things that fall under polygon. So we're going to go ahead and create the diamonds. Let's go to View, and I want to go ahead and turn the Smart Guides off for this. What we're going to do is go over here to our Tools panel and grab our Polygon Tool. With our Polygon Tool, if you see, when we draw, it just makes this shape. We don't necessarily want that. I'm going to do Control Z. So I'm going to begin drawing a polygon, but don't let go of the mouse. You're going to hit the down arrow to change the number of sides on that polygon. So I actually want a triangle, which is a kind of polygon. I haven't released my mouse yet. I'm going to hold the Shift key and notice how it automatically straightened that out for the bottom. Let's go ahead and release the mouse key. So now I have a cute little triangle. But you'll notice that I didn't get my measurement, my tooltips, because my Smart Guides are turned off. So having your Smart Guides on does you a lot of favors. So let's go ahead and turn those back on. Let's go to View and Smart Guides, so you can kind of see better what those tools actually do for you. Alright, let's go ahead and change the color. Let's go to our Fill, and we want it to be kind of a little bit of a darker gray on our diamond. So let's go to the one that ends with 30. It's like the fourth one from the end. So we've got a slightly darker gray in order to make the part of our diamond. So now what we're going to do with with our triangle still selected, you're going to notice we've got this little strange diamond shaped thing right here. Notice what happens when you select and yank on that. It gives you different sides of the polygon. So you do have a couple different ways in order to change what you've created. So it's a lot easier than trying to take three different line segments and connect them. Use your Polygon tool, use the tools to make your life a lot easier. So let's go ahead and change the shape of our triangle a little bit. We're going to grab this corner and we want to drag it out to about 1.2 inches. So we can also change that here if we do a width of 1.2, and let's go ahead and do a height of 0.8. So now we've got that. So with our triangle still selected, we're going to edit it. Let's go Object, let's go Transform, and we want Reflect, which means we're going to make a copy of it. We want to make a horizontal copy. You can always do a preview and see what's going to happen. And I want to make a copy of it. So now I've got two triangles up and down on top of each other. I'm going to go ahead, grab my selection tool, and drag that second triangle down. So now I've got this nice little diamond shape. But I actually want it to look like Diamond the Gem. So there's a few different things we can do with that. We're going to go ahead and select our top triangle. We're going to go over here and grab our eraser tool. With our eraser tool, and we have to hit Shift, we're actually going to hold Shift and drag across. And so now we have basically broken that shape, and you can see the gem diamond starting to appear. I'm going to go ahead and grab my selection tool, click on the white, and click the upper triangle because I don't need that, and I'm going to delete it. So now you see you've got the two different pieces which will eventually become your diamond. Let's go ahead and make it a little more obvious. So we're going to click on this top one, and let's change our fill color to something a little bit lighter. So let's go to the one that ends with 5. And that's a pretty good. I like that one. So next let's click on the darker gray one. And we're going to do an Alt drag. So Alt drag is going to make a copy. Should have made a copy. Click Alt drag. There you go. So now I've got a copy of that triangle because eventually we're going to turn this triangle into a mountain. Let's go ahead and do a Control S to save. And we need to make this weird triangle into a mountain. Let's go ahead and do that by going to our Transform, going to More Options, and we want this one that says Make Sides Equal. So let's do that again. Escape. More Options. And my Make Sides Equal totally disappeared. Let's try that one more time. Alright, well I'm going to figure out where Make Sides Equal went to. For now, let's go ahead and grab our Direct Selection tool, grab this top widget, and we want to double click it, bring it down, and you notice we are changing all the corners of that mountain at one time, which we don't necessarily want to do. So let's go ahead and do a Control Z to undo. Let's go ahead and just grab this top anchor. That'll make it totally shrink our mountain, which we don't want to do. So Control Z for that. So let's go ahead and pull this down. And and make it the mountain for now. And now we've got kind of our mountain shape. Let's click out of the way of that one, scoosh you out of the way. Close our transform panel. So now I've got part of a diamond, I've got part of a mountain. Our mountain we will play with more when we place him. We actually want to now put some stars, kind of some little reflections. You'll see little star reflections on our diamond to make it fancy. So let's go back here. Let's figure out how to make some stars. You're going to go over here to your star tool on your shapes panel. And there's a few different things we can do to create a star. If you just click and drag, you're going to get your typical gold star, 5-pointed star. So let's click and drag, but keep holding. You can do a few different things here. You can hit the up arrow, which is going to change the number of points on your star. You can also hit Shift and drag. It'll straighten that out. And hit Control and drag it and see how pointy your star is going to be. So you've got quite a few different things that you can do with that star. Let's go ahead and straighten it out with my Shift. And I'm going to release my mouse button. And I now have my star. Let's go ahead and play with it a little bit more. Let's change our stroke so it has 0 stroke. And let's go ahead and fill it with white. So our fill is white, which is fine when we can see it here. Otherwise we're going to have to go, remember we lost items on our artboards before, but there are ways to find them. Let's go ahead and grab our selection tool. I'm going to hit my Shift, drag it in, make it a little bit smaller, because that was a little bit obnoxious. So let's go ahead and draw one more star. Grab my star tool, drag and pull. I'm going to hit up or down for the number of points. I'm going to hit Control for how deep I want those points to go. I release my Control, I release my mouse. I can grab my selection and resize that. But now I can't see where it is. So let's go to View and Outline, and now I can see where my stars are. So I can select this star. Let's go back to View, GPU, Preview, and I can grab and resize this star accordingly. Hold Shift to do it proportionally. And now you get kind of that cute little bling look. Now I know I've got another star over here, so I can take and drag it. Let's make it kind of on the top. So right now we only see part of the star coming through, but when you actually put it on the green background, you will actually see that top of the star come back in. Alright, so what do we need to do now? Let's go ahead and drag our selection tool, drag a marquee all the way around all of them, and let's go over here to our properties panel and say group. So now we have a single group with our really awesome diamond in it. So we're going to work on the last element that we need to create to put on the map, which is this cute little Skull-and-Crossbones actual bones thing. You don't have to be an artist to do this. You just have to manipulate shapes. Let's go ahead and grab our line tool, and let's go ahead and drag it for about 1.5 inches. And we're going to let go. With it still selected, we're going to use the pointer on just the right end. And notice it tips the line from the middle. So it rotates that line from the middle. We want an angle of 0. So we can either try and do it by eyeballs, or you can go over here to your properties panel and make it nice and flat. So far it doesn't look like a bone. Let's play with it a little bit more. With it selected, let's change the stroke to about 15 points. You'll notice 15 is not one of your choices here, so you can go ahead and type 15 into the box. And let's choose a color for that stroke. Brown is not a very good color for a bone, so let's go ahead and make it this gray that ends with the 10. It's the second one from the last. And technically, all of this, it looks like a rectangle, but it's really just a line. So let's go ahead and make it a little bit bigger and expand that shape. Let's go Object, come down to Path, and we want to outline the stroke. So now we've changed that stroke into an actual shape, which is pretty cool. Now remember, we drew this circle earlier. We didn't know what we were doing with the circle. We're actually going to take the circle, drag it down, use those Align, and align it with the corner of what will be our bone. We're then going to do an Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste, and we can bring it up over here. Align it so you get that part of the bone. I'm going to select it again. If I hit Alt and drag, I will get another copy. Hit Alt and drag, another copy. So now I have this cute little bone. I'm going to make it a little off center because I think it's a little fun. Alright, so I've got my bone here. So now what do we want to do? We want to go ahead and make this into a group. So we're going to drag and select, come over to our properties and group. So now instead of having 5 shapes, we have just one. So let's go over off the corner because we know we're making another X marks the spot. Click and hit Shift. And it's not shifting. Here we go. Let's go ahead and bump it up to, let's go another 45 degrees. So you see it's getting kind of bigger. Alright, so it's about 45 degrees. You can see your angle right here. Change it to 45 exactly if you want to. Alright, so now we need to create the other X. We could either do a copy and paste and mess with it, or we can use the software. Object, Transform, Reflect, and this time we want to do vertical, and we want to make a copy. So now we have a second one. So that is all for this part of this tutorial. We will continue with the rest of the postcard in the next one.